Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I am Master Sergeant Justin Twilley, and it is my honor to be your narrator and guide you through today's ceremony. As a reminder, outdoor protocol will be observed, and you'll be prompted to stand and be seated at the appropriate times. During the playing of ruffles and flourishes, all military members should stand at attention and salute while facing the presiding official. During the singing of the national anthem, military members will stand at attention, face the flag, and render a salute. Civilian guests should also stand, if able, remove headgear, and place the right hand over their heart. We are here today to honor the extraordinary heroism of 14 remarkable airmen. The presiding official for today's ceremony is the Commander, Air Force Special Operations Command, Lieutenant General Jim Slife. We also welcome and recognize our distinguished guests in attendance today. Please hold your applause until the end. From the Air Force Special Operations Command Team, spouse of the Commander, Mrs. Gwendolyn Slife. The Command Chief, Chief Master Sergeant Corey Olson. Spouse of the Deputy Commander, Mrs. Jennifer Beckland. The Mayor of Fort Walton Beach, the Honorable Dick Reinerson and his spouse, Janie. County Commissioner for District 4, the Honorable Dave Peach and his spouse, Lynn. From the 1st Special Operations Wing Command Team, spouse of the Commander, Mrs. Melissa Conley. And the Vice Commander, Colonel Michael Curry. The Commander, 24 Special Operations Wing, Colonel Matt Allen. From the 492nd Special Operations Wing Command Team, Colonel Andrew Jett. And the Command Chief, Chief Master Sergeant Clint Grizzle. And to all other group and squadron commanders, partner unit commanders, chiefs, first sergeants, honorary commanders, civic leaders, and the men and women of Hurlburt Field, thank you all for sharing this day with us. We are also joined by our superior maintenance personnel whose dedicated efforts generated our aircraft, the mighty AC-130U. Without them, this day would not be possible. Lastly, we are honored to have in attendance 13 of the crew members being recognized today and their families and friends. Accompanying Captain Aberholden are his spouse, Francis Aberholden, his parents, Scott and Judy Aberholden, his brother Eric and his wife, Stephanie, and their daughter Lorelei. Accompanying Captain Crandall are his parents, John and Deborah Crandall, his sister, Ashley Crandall, his brother, Sean Crandall. Accompanying Captain Uvegas are his spouse, Stephanie Uvegas. Accompanying Lieutenant Maiolo are his parents, John and Beverly Maiolo, his sisters, Taylor and Logan. Accompanying Tech Sergeant Estes are his spouse, Tracy, and their sons, Aiden, Jackson, and Harrison. Accompanying Tech Sergeant Griffin are his spouse, Tiara, and their sons, Grayson and Jackson. Accompanying Tech Sergeant Parent are his spouse, Courtney, and their son, Easton, his parents, Billy and Rhonda Parent. Accompanying Staff Sergeant Diaz are his significant other, Staff Sergeant Shannon Wicks, his mother, Yolanda Diaz. Accompanying Staff Sergeant Fries are his spouse, Cassandra, and their son, Asher, as well as his parents-in-law, Lee and Kirsten Cooper. Accompanying Senior Airman Baton is his significant other, Mackenzie Eveland. Accompanying Senior Airman Dean are his friends, Denasia Thompson. Ladies and gentlemen, please stand for the arrival of the official party and remain standing for the playing of ruffles and flourishes, presentation of the colors, singing of the national anthem, and the invocation.
to see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we held at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave.
Right shoulder. Hot. March. Hot. I'd invite you to pray with me. Our Lord and our God, we gather together this morning as thankful men and women, as SOF, as the AFSCOT community, and as the Team Hurlburt family. We unite together to recognize distinctive heroism and achievement. With hearts that swell with joy and with pride, we give you thanks for Spooky 41, their mission on the 3rd and 4th of April 2019 over Nangarhar Province. We gather together today to praise you for the crew of Spooky 41 and to recognize them with 12 receiving air medals and 2 receiving the Distinguished Flying Cross. We thank you for, as described by the lead JTAC there on the ground, the quote-unquote legendary airmanship of Captains Abderhalden and Crandall, and the excellence of the entire crew. Because of Spooky 41, we are able to celebrate medals today instead of conducting memorial services back in April. Just down the road in our air park, there is a memorial that quotes Isaiah chapter 6, verse 8. And I heard the voice of the Lord saying, "Whom shall I send, and who will go for us?" Lord, we thank you that the crew of Spooky 41 and all of those in Spooky Nation have stood up with pride and with conviction and answered that call. Here am I, Lord. Send me. We thank you for these Air Commandos who are ready, relevant, and resilient anytime and any place. And Lord, we thank you for those who are part of this operation that have traveled great distances to be with us today and celebrate. And so it is with joy and gratitude that we commit ourselves, we commit our families, and we commit our future into your almighty hands. And we do this, praying this in all things by your grace and for your glory. Amen.
Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated. On behalf of the men and women of the 4th Special Operations Squadron, we offer our sincere appreciation to the Hurlburt Field Honor Guard for their continued support and professionalism, Airman Marks for that heartfelt rendition of our national anthem, and Chaplain Wright for that inspiring invocation. Today is a special day for the men and women of Air Force Special Operations Command and our greater Special Operations community, as we have an opportunity to recognize an extraordinary group of Air Commandos who answered their nation's call to fight in the global war on terrorism. We have in our attendance 3 members of the ground force team that were active participants during this mission. They've traveled from Maxwell Air Force Base, Alabama, Fort Carson, Colorado, and Fort Bragg, North Carolina, respectively, to share with us a few words about their experiences. U.S. Air Force Major Jeffrey Wright and U.S. Army Green Berets Major Jared Tomberlin and Captain Ben Carnell. The floor is yours, sirs.
Good morning. Distinguished guests, friends and family members, and especially you air crew Spooky 41. Just want to say thank you for giving us the opportunity to be a part of this momentous occasion. It's not very often that we get to see some of our brothers be so adequately recognized for their courage and steadfast commitment to duty and our great nation, so thank you for inviting us. About a year ago, all across Afghanistan, there was a lot of buzz about a big operation that was in development that was directly tied to national security. ISIS had been reeling from devastating defeats across the Levant, and they'd been putting together a new base of operations in the austere mountains of southern Afghanistan in Nangarhar, around a place called Tora Bora. Now, this name should sound familiar to most of you, as it's a part of Afghanistan that Osama bin Laden used to escape the initial wrath of the U.S. military might in the days and weeks following September 11th, 2001. So there's a special significance for America tied to this operation due to the location and proximity that was going on. And we had a very credible intelligence support that ISIS was not only preparing for their summer fighting season in Afghanistan, but also directly supporting attacks against the United States on our homeland from a command location deep inside the Kugyani district of Nangarhar in a village called Barsangani. An outpouring of intelligence reports told us that Barsangani was an impenetrable forest of caves and tunnel systems and in-depth fighting positions and bunkers that we would pay for every step that we took in that stronghold with the blood of U.S. soldiers, and we were strongly recommended not to go in. 2 weeks prior, a smaller assault force had lost 3 men trying to get a foothold and were never even able to break through. Well, George Washington crossed the Delaware and Josh Chamberlain charged at Gettysburg, and Eisenhower even stormed the beaches of Normandy, so by God, we were going to go into Barsangani. For about a month, our 600-man assault force planned to rehearse an operation that many of us knew would be the hardest fighting that we've probably ever done, and for some of us it was. We'd be scoring up against hardened foreign fighters, not the Taliban next generation of 15-year-old fighters that we've been seeing the last 2 decades of fighting, but these were foreign fighters that were bent and wanted nothing more than the destruction of our values, to kill us and destroy our American way of life. This mission meant something to all of us, and it meant defeating enemies and protecting our homeland, our families and our friends, and those of you sitting here in the crowd today. And it just cannot be understated how serious these threats were, dialed down to individuals in specific cities in the U.S. that were being prepared for imminent attacks. To give you an idea of the caliber of men that were leading this assault force, the night before we launched into the village, we got a Red Cross message from one of our soldiers' wives. notifying us that she was going into labor early and that her husband, Colin Lightfoot, needed to come home if he wanted to be a part of that event. We saw Colin the next day in the hangar, just like this one that we're in today that we were all staging in. And I asked him if he wanted to go, and he didn't even think twice about it. And the next time I heard his name was the following day when his battle roster number was called across the radio saying that he was injured and was in need of an urgent medical evacuation along with 12 other Afghans that had been wounded in the fighting. Ben Carnell, who's sitting in the crowd with you today, had already been shot a half an hour before that and was being evacuated for the moment. And I paused there and became acutely aware of just this symphony of destruction that was being orchestrated around us, and especially the biggest gun that we had in the fight, Spooky 4-1. Though the aircrew had been in the sky watching our initial assault, providing covering fire as necessary throughout the operation to this point, it was now the speed and accuracy and pure professionalism that was brought to bear that truly amazed me. And when every second mattered and lives were on the line, everybody was on top of their game in that aircraft, 100% and then some. Because of what you guys did, your steadfast commitment to men you'd never met, men like Colin Lightfoot got to meet his daughter. Instead, and families across America got to wake up and not hear the news about another tragic terrorist attack on our U.S. soil. And for over 4 days of fighting, with your help, we would destroy countless enemy fighters. Well, we counted, and it was a lot. But more interesting, we would stack up a pocket full of medals, including numerous Purple Hearts, individual Valor medals, and 3 Silver Stars for conspicuous gallantry across 2 different organizations, our ground force on the ground and then the medevac pilots that were pulling our guys out. Most importantly, on this one, we bring everybody home. And now we add your awards to the tally of heroic actions that happened during the Battle of Barsangani. And I've always wondered if it's fitting or if it's unfortunate that some of the greatest moments of your lives and our lives in the service will only be known by the handful of those that lived through it with us. I know that we don't do it for awards or acceptance speeches or accolades, but we do it because we love it and we love this country. And I've been nothing short of humbled by your commitment to your profession and your commitment to each other. And though most will never hear your stories of service and sacrifice, I'll always know what you did for my men, and I'll never forget it. God bless you. God bless America. Dale Presso LeVang.
Good morning. I'll echo what Major Tomlin said. I can't say how fortunate I feel to be here. The appreciation that we have for being able to join you in this event and the recognition of what Spooky 4-1 did. But I wanted to provide some context as a guy on the ground, just how important their professionalism and heroism was, not only to the operation, but to countless lives and families as we move on from that event. It made me think of a couple things about leadership, and just hearing the crew last night talk about all the things they had to do to provide accurate fire, it echoed and really exponentiated what I thought about leadership with regards to this operation. When something's worthwhile, leaders are drawn to it, and they find a way to overcome obstacles. So as Major Tomlin said, as we got this intelligence that we needed to conduct this operation, it became apparent that it would prevent an attack on the homeland. There were those that pushed back, saying that it couldn't be done. And I'll brag on my commander for a minute. I sat in the brief with him, and an intelligence officer had laid out a very compelling case why we shouldn't go in there. And I was prepared to back him up with a whole series of academic statements about why we should go in. And I'll never forget, he looked at me and said, well, we descend from the people that ascended Point to Hawk, so we can do it. And it was just that type of commitment and leadership and coolness that would end up carrying the day, both on the ground and in the air. We would be stood down prior to the operation, and we lost a lot of steam. We weren't sure we were going to conduct it. But like I said, leaders rise to the occasion. And as we were spun back up, it was incredible to see the logistics and combat power that were brought to bear to move across the Sajoa to provide fires and get us to the fight that night. And so leaders set conditions. There were some logistics to both get us there, and also that the air crew faced that night in the AC-130. Just hearing their stories last night about powering down systems and preserving fuel so they could stay in the fight for just one moment longer to provide one more accurate shot to protect us was phenomenal. Leaders build trust. I met Major Wright maybe a week before we conducted this operation, and the way he articulated the air plan to protect our maneuver on the ground was incredible, and it instilled in me the trust that would be required to move out on that objective, knowing that a crew like Spooky 41 and JTACs could provide accurate fire to protect my maneuver and the maneuver of my brothers. Leaders are calm and rise to the occasion. I'd like to sit here and describe to you just how horrendous the terrain was and how hardened those fighters were and how dug in they were, but I can't. I don't have the words to articulate it. I'm not smart enough, and it was just that vicious. Unfortunately, I think a lot of operations are graded by how many wounded there are, or unfortunately how many mortal casualties there are. And this objective certainly warranted several, but because of planning, the ferocity of the assault force, and the professionalism of the aircrew overhead, we fortunately brought everybody home. That's not to say that it wasn't a place that many men could have died. But in the worst moments, in the most confusing moments, leaders rose to the occasion. The crew last night explained to us just how tight they were on ammo and ammunition and fuel, and the tight decisions they made to make sure they could stay on station just a little bit longer. It's moved me in a way that I can't really describe, and I won't go on much longer, but I think it's important that I say from the regiment, from the assault force, and more specifically from my wife and my son and my daughter, I want to thank you for your professionalism and for rising to the occasion. Without any of that, I would not have been hoisted out of there, and I wouldn't be standing here in front of you today. So I'm indebted to you in a way I can't describe, and I want to thank you all for joining us and celebrating their heroism. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Major Jeff Wright. It's an incredible honor to be here today, and my objective is to help you understand just why Spooky 41's actions were so noteworthy and so heroic. First, any maintainers out there who are with me in Afghanistan? Anybody y'all who's still here? All right, well, thank you. Hoo-yah! You guys are awesome. Like I said to you in the hangar when I come visit you, if it weren't for what you do, none of this would happen. We needed Spooky 41 that day to keep us alive, and the reason it was in the orbit is because of your hard work. You put it there. So these guys are getting recognized for it, and rightfully so, but I want you to have a little bit of pep in your step as well, because you deserve some recognition. Thank you from the ST community. Okay, so for those of you guys who might not be familiar with Special Tactics, who we are and what we do, we're the Air Force's ground special operators. Air-ground integration is our specialty, and so in layman's terms, we're the guys who are usually with our Green Beret brothers, with our SEAL brothers. We're the ones on the radio directing airstrikes, coordinating movement in the air, conducting air traffic control, that kind of thing. We do a whole lot of other things, but the purpose of me saying that is to let you know that we are habitually with these guys when they're out on operations. So for this battle, I was in charge of a 7-man special tactics team. 5 of my CCTs were with their habitually aligned ODAs, and I had an ALO with me, and the 2 of us were in Major Tomberlin's hip pocket up on the OP, the observation point, and we were acting as a doctrinal fire support team integrating air, ground, and electronic fires. So to get you an idea of exactly what this terrain looked like, I'm going to ask you to make a terrain model with me. So take your right hand, like you're holding a beer can or something, and then have it about chest level right in front of you. And this kind of crab claw shape is what the terrain looked like. One way in, one way out, and that's the wrist. It had a front row, which is the thumb, and then a back longer row, which is the finger. Staff Sergeant Rob Henry was the lead JTAC on the clearance element, and he was at the wrist when they pushed in, and they never really even got up to the knuckle because of how thick the terrain was and how bad the fighting was. This was a really challenging task under any conditions, but the night in question exceeds anything that I've ever seen in training or in combat. So the intelligence that Captain Carnell was talking about, a couple of days before this operation, that same intel guy handed me a literal 3-ring binder, this thick, filled with multi-source intelligence on everything we knew about this objective area. It was a lot. It was a very intimidating thing. These guys were completely prepared. They had false walls in the compounds. They had spike strips in the ground that they had people would step on. They had bombs in the walls. They had people above you, below you, the ability to move subterranean between places. If you've been on YouTube and you know the video of the guys pouring aluminum into anthills and they see how deep that thing goes, just on the surface it looks like just an anthill, but it goes all the way down. And that's exactly how this place was. It was like the mines of Moria, in that it went all the way back, all the way down, and they could pop up and down at will. So when the assault force, let me pause there 1 second. The reason why we're having trouble explaining just how bad this was is that it lacks recent historical context. We literally have to reach back to World War II, examples like Normandy or Iwo Jima or Aben Email, to get an accurate analog for just how nasty this terrain was and how much they were prepared for our assault. So when the assault force began the clearance, I had 9 aircraft overhead, and that was quickly joined by medevac aircraft and their escorts. Staff Sergeant Rob Henry was the CCT JTAC with the lead element, and I listened to him on the radio. He's a calm guy, and I heard what he was saying, and it took me a second to reconcile that calmness in his voice with what he was telling me. The enemy was employing a technique where they were trying to neutralize our firepower by hugging us, by getting so close to us that we couldn't drop bombs, we couldn't shoot hellfires. They were too close for us to use the asymmetric advantage that usually keeps us alive in combat. And let me elaborate on that. Admiral McRaven's definition of a special operation involves a force achieving relative superiority to another force that has conventional superiority. We had over 600 men. We had a lot of firepower, but the enemy's advantage in terrain, mobility, and preparation more than made up for their numerical inferiority, if that was even the case. There were so many of them, we may not have actually been the numerically superior force. Normally, air power is the asymmetric advantage that allows us to persevere in those circumstances. It gives ground soft the ability to defeat enemies who both have numerical superiority and are on the tactical defensive. Without precision strike capabilities, it's a fair fight at best, and that's not how we like to do things. So as I'm processing reports of the casualties and plotting updated and friendly positions on my map, through the fog of war, I realized that I can't apply that asymmetric capability from any of the aircraft that I have overhead except for one. I have an AC-130 uniform. Spooky 4-1 is our chance to get out of this thing. So I passed marking control to Staff Sergeant Henry. I cleared the airspace and I let these guys get to work. At that point, the gunship is our only chance of gaining and maintaining fire superiority. We needed fire support that exceeded the accuracy of what the enemy thought we could do, and we had to do it faster than they thought we could react. For me to drop a bomb, a GBU series from a fixed-wing aircraft, that would take at best 4 minutes. That's record speed. We didn't have 4 minutes to wait. There was no room for error. No room for error in delivery, no room for error in accuracy. We needed it now. And I believe I speak for all STJTACs when I say that the reason we trusted Spooky 4-1 to shoot first rounds danger close in such a chaotic environment is not the hardware. To be sure, the AC-130 and its cannons are exactly what we needed. It was the only viable option at that moment, but the weapon system is only as good as the crew working it. Humans are more important than hardware. That's soft truth number one. Every night we go on objective, we trust you to be the asymmetric capability that gets us out of situations where we are outgunned. We train with you stateside. We see each other on the weekends. And for example, quick show of hands, who here got headbutted by Everett yesterday at Dewey's? Good number of you. Sorry about that, guys. But we know each other. We know each other's families. We see each other year after year, growing up with each other at the same duty stations. On that night, we needed you. And because we're part of the same tribe, if you will, we knew that any words that we said were going to be backed up by all those unspoken words, the things that we know just from being a tight team together, part of that AFSOC family. You heard Rob's voice, you heard my voice, and you sprung into action. Y'all have all seen the t-shirts, May the 4th be with you. That night, the 4th was with us, and it made all the difference. I can't overstate how critical the next moments were. Rob passed target info to Spooky 4-1, and their response was so fast, I distinctly remember wondering if they were even shooting at the right target. And indeed they were. On target, on time. The enemy thought that their proximity to friendlies would mitigate their ability for us to bring fires to bear on them, but now they're being chewed up by the AC-130's guns, and they got a problem. The assault force now had the space they needed to consolidate their position, evacuate the wounded, and regroup. The only viable landing zones were too far away. So The best solution, still fraught with risk, was to individually hoist the wounded in and out of the casualty collection point, well within the range of the enemy's machine guns and rocket-propelled grenades. And I've seen my share of medevac over the years. Time and again, I've seen the enemy take great risks when they have the opportunity to shoot down our helicopters. And I had a tremendous sense of dread watching this thing at a hover. This is how it happens. This is how aircraft get shot down and how tragedies become major tragedies. But the enemy didn't get a single shot off. Spooky 4-1 laid down a barrage of constant fires, denying the enemy to get into place or to get a shooting solution. And that mission didn't end once the wounded were safely evacuated. Once friendlies retrograded a safe distance away, we used that same binder of multi-source intelligence and real-time intelligence to pummel the enemy. F-16s arrived with 2,000-pounders, and I put some delay-fused 2,000-pounders into that network of tunnels to collapse the enemy's ability to retrograde. So what they were once using as a location to plan attacks on the United States, they were now trapped in, like shooting fish in a barrel for the next couple of days, and we did just that. It was a free fire area. Every single jet, RPA, and helicopter went back with slick wings, and we put all that ordnance directly onto the enemies of America. The result was a devastating blow to ISIS-K. We accounted for well over 100 enemy killed in action, several of whom were named objectives. Perhaps the most satisfying moment from my perspective was listening as ISIS-K commanders turned on each other, hurling extremely explicit insults at each other over their predicament. We also got to listen as the Taliban taunted ISIS-K on their radios, saying that they were going to come take the village because clearly ISIS couldn't hold it. But most importantly, once Spooky 4-1 started shooting, no further harm befell Americans or Afghan allies. When I got back to Bath after the mission, I made a beeline for the Gunship guys. I met you on the ramp, and I thank you for what you've done with us. I jumped onto the plane and I thanked you in my way that I do, and I shook your hands one by one. And if it were not for that incredible display of airmanship, there's zero doubt in my mind that American lives would have been lost that day. Your actions allowed us to turn this battle from a tragedy into a major rout of enemy forces. On behalf of my Special Tactics teammates, thank you for your professionalism. Thank you for your tireless work in preparing for these most critical moments of our careers. And thank you to the families whose support and understanding makes all of this possible. Hoo-yah, Spooky 4-1.
Sirs, we are grateful to you for making time to be here to tell your stories. At this time, it is my honor to invite today's presiding official, Lieutenant General Jim Slife, to the podium to offer his remarks. Sir, the floor is yours.
All right. Looks like we're going to do this extemporaneous. Hey, thanks, Colonel Conley and Colonel Curry, for giving me the opportunity to join you today. It's okay. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to join you today. You know, when this is unusual. I was telling some of the family members that this is the first one of these type ceremonies that I've done in my 8 months back in AFSOC. So this is not an everyday occasion that we do something like this. But to be honest with you, I was a little curious about why I would be invited to preside. Certainly, it's a prestigious ceremony. But I know when I was a wing commander, I was jealous about these kind of things. I didn't want to invite somebody to come and preside over a ceremony. So, Colonel Curry, it became clear to me in the moments immediately preceding the opportunity to stand up here why it was that you invited me. It's because you knew that at best I would be the fourth best speaker standing at this podium today. So thanks for the setup there. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I won't belabor the point that our teammates that were actually there on the ground made far better than I can. But I do want to talk just for a little bit from the heart, without prepared remarks this morning, about how proud I am to be up here and what it means to me to be in the company of such airmen and our joint teammates. About 30 years ago, This hangar was a helicopter hangar, and this ramp out here was a helicopter ramp. And I was a helicopter pilot in my first assignment at Hurlburt Field, and so this was our maintenance hangar. And I was standing somewhere on this ramp out here the day the first AC-130U gunship landed at Hurlburt Field. And this is probably the last ceremony of this sort that we will do for any AC-130U crew before the last aircraft depart Hurlburt Field a little later this year. And so my tenure in AFSOC has spanned the entirety of the 4th SOS and the entirety of the AC-130U. And so it's a real privilege to be here. We will take this airplane or one like it and we'll put it over in our air park, and it will look something like some of the other aircraft that are over there. Clearly there are distinctions between the various gunships that we've fielded over the years. We've got a new one that we're in the process of fielding, the AC-130J. To be sure, it has increased capabilities. It's got better performing engines, better performing sensors, greater munitions, so on and so forth. But as our teammates have pointed out, those sensors, those munitions, those engines, all those improvements that we make are nibbling around the margins. Because the most lethal part of any gunship is not the 25 millimeter, the 40 millimeter, the 105 millimeter sticking out of the side of this big, beautiful airplane. The most lethal part of a gunship is the crew. And there is nothing, I've flown every aircraft in the AFSOC inventory in combat. And I will tell you that there is nothing more complicated than the dance that goes on in a gunship to bring the kind of capability that our teammates have described this morning to bear on our nation's adversaries. The orchestration that goes on is unlike anything that you will see anyplace else in AFSOC, anyplace else in the United States Air Force. So it's fitting today that we have the opportunity not to talk about an airplane and sensors and munitions and that kind of stuff, but we have the opportunity to recognize the most important part of the gunship, its crew. So gentlemen, if you'd please join me at center stage, we'll get started with the presentation with a couple of distinguished flying crosses. Thank you very much.
Thank you, General Slife. 2 members of Spooky 4-1 are receiving the Distinguished Flying Cross Medal. The DFC is awarded to those who distinguish themselves by heroism or extraordinary achievement while participating in aerial flight. Ladies and gentlemen, please stand for the presentation of the Distinguished Flying Cross.
Policy order.
Attention to orders. To all who shall see these presents greeting. This is to certify that the President of the United States of America, authorized by Act of Congress, July 2nd, 1926, has awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross to Captain Niels J. Aberhalden and Captain John H. Crandall, Jr., who distinguished themselves by heroism while participating in aerial flight as AC-130U crew, 4th Expeditionary Special Operations Squadron, Combined Joint Special Operations Air Component, Afghanistan, on the night of 3 April 2019 into the morning of 4 April 2019. During Operation Freedom's Sentinel, in support of the Resolute Support Mission, during that period, near Nangarhar Province, Afghanistan, the crew of Spooky 4-1's exemplary performance and battlefield coordination for more than 9 hours overhead coalition forces enabled the safe recovery of all 15 patients of a mass casualty event. With 625 coalition forces spread over 2 kilometers, the crew supported the clearing of an Islamic State of Iraq and Syria Khorasan redoubt. Less than 100 meters into the clearance, enemy combatants, fighting from fortifications in civilian builds, engaged the assault force at extreme close range, striking coalition forces with an improvised explosive device, causing a mass casualty. Receiving calls for fire from 3 joint terminal attack controllers spread throughout the fortress, the crew prosecuted 9 fire missions within 35 minutes. Their rounds impacted their targets inside 32 seconds from request on 3 separate occasions. As the first casualty evacuation helicopters retrieved 3 urgent surgical patients, they hovered over the battlefield for a total of 15 minutes, while the crew worked fire missions inside 140 meters in defense of the helicopters and the assault force. With their fuel now critically low, a non-combatant medic on the battlefield, and their backfield air support departing for an in-flight emergency, the crew's battlefield coordination, taking place for 6 radios and fires in support of 3 attack controllers, ensured the casualty evacuation continued despite the deteriorating circumstances. After refueling, the crew covered 2 more casualty evacuation missions while striking 5 danger close targets for another friendly element in the village, taking enemy fire. In total, the crew conducted 29 fire missions, killed at least 20 insurgents, and leveled 15 enemy structures. The crew prevented the enemy from bringing any fires on the only helicopter landing zone in the village, allowing casualty evacuation helicopters to hover for 65 minutes and recover all 15 combat casualties. The outstanding heroism and selfless devotion to duty displayed by these individuals reflects great credit upon themselves and the United States Air Force. Captain Niels Aberholden, Aircraft Commander, and Captain John Crandall, Jr., Navigator. In addition, we are presenting the Air Medal to 11 members of Spooky 4-1. The Air Medal is awarded to those who distinguish themselves by meritorious achievement while participating in aerial flight. Ladies and gentlemen, please remain standing for the presentation of the Air Medal.
Publish the order.
Attention to orders. To all who shall see these presents greeting. This is to certify that the President of the United States of America, authorized by Act of Congress July 2nd, 1926, has awarded the Air Medal to Captain Micah U. Vegas, Captain Brian Yee, Lieutenant Nicholas Mayolo, Tech Sergeant Ryan Estes, Tech Sergeant Austin Parent, Staff Sergeant Jacob Griffin, Staff Sergeant Omar Diaz, Staff Sergeant Jonathan Fries, Staff Sergeant Michael Martinez, Staff Sergeant Samuel Mayfield, Senior Airman Jacob Bateman, and A1C Zadok Dean III, who distinguished themselves by meritorious achievement while participating in aerial flight as AC-130U crew members, 4th Expeditionary Special Operations Squadron, Combined Joint Special Operations Air Component, Afghanistan, on 3 April 2019, during Operation Freedom's Sentinel in support of the Resolute Support Mission. On this date, the crew flew a close air support mission supporting 625 U.S. and coalition forces clearing an Islamic State of Iraq and Syria Khorasan redoubt. Once friendlies entered the village, they took fire from enemy fighters hiding in civilian structures. While coordinating to extract a casualty, coalition forces were struck with an improvised explosive device, wounding 14 more soldiers. The crew utilized the 25mm, 40mm, and 105mm cannons to provide cover fire, striking 9 targets in 35 minutes, allowing casualty evacuation helicopters to reach the urgent surgical patients. With no space to land, 3 helicopters hovered for a total of 65 minutes above the battlefield to hoist 15 patients while the crew of Spooky 4-1 struck enemy positions as close as 180 meters away. As a result of the overwhelming fires the crew delivered, the casualty evacuation helicopters never once took enemy fire. In nearly 10 hours overhead the target area, the crew of Spooky 4-1 prosecuted 29 total fire missions, firing within danger close distance to friendly forces 11 times, allowing for the safe exfiltration of all casualties. The professional skill and airmanship displayed by these individuals reflect great credit upon themselves and the United States Air Force. Captain Micah U. Vegas, Fire Control Officer. Captain Brian Yee, co-pilot. Lieutenant Nicholas Maiolo, Electronic Warfare Officer. Tech Sergeant Ryan Estes, Aerial Gunner. Tech Sergeant Austin Parent, Aerial Gunner. Staff Sergeant Jacob Griffin, Flight Engineer. Staff Sergeant Homar Diaz, Sensor Operator. Staff Sergeant Jonathan Fries, Direct Support Operator. Staff Sergeant Michael Martinez, Aerial Gunner. Senior Airman Jacob Bateman, Aerial Gunner. And A1C Zadok Dean III, Aerial Gunner. Thank you, General Slife. Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated. One other crew member has separated from the service and was unable to join us for the presentation today. Staff Sergeant Samuel Mayfield, a sensor operator, was also awarded the Air Medal. Please join me in one more round of applause for all of today's medal recipients. On behalf of the men and women of the 4th Special Operations Squadron, we thank everyone for attending today's medal presentation ceremony. Ladies and gentlemen, please stand and join us in singing of the Air Force song and remain standing for the departure of the official party. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us today for this historic ceremony honoring these Air Commandos. Please take this opportunity to congratulate the aircrew of Spooky 4-1 on their awards. This concludes our ceremony. Thank you and have a wonderful day.